Welcome to today's webinar, the wrap up for our series on governing communities' issues and frustrations. This episode, we're from here taking action for resolving issues and problems in municipal governance. That'll be the focus. I'll provide a little bit of a review of what we've learned so far, the design of the survey, and some of the highlights that showed up in episode 1 and episode 2. I say the following a bit tongue-in-cheek. Let's keep the word protests out of the room. It seems to have caught on dramatically. There's an epidemic seems to be going on across North America. So I don't think this exercise needs to use the word protests. So as we discover what needs attention and what the recommendations really have highlighted the importance of communications and collaboration. So let's see if we can get a little bit here. Here's objectives today. I'd like to provide an overview of the survey, the results of what is important today in the governing of municipalities and what is recommended, mainly reported by the CAOs, the mayors, and the councillors who participated in the survey. Secondly, I'd like to propose action, that is what might be done for following through on the recommendations for each of the 4 relationships that were identified as involved in managing the municipalities, and that's the councils themselves, other municipalities, the province, and certainly the public that is has probably the closest relationship with the municipalities. And finally, to engage you and the panel. Dennis Pommen is with us and has been throughout the series, and Don Ringrose, and George Cuff may show up in the course of the review. I know he's out in BC right now, writing his book about everything he's learned about municipalities, and it will run several thousand pages, I'm sure. But in any case, I do hope that you as the viewers will challenge some of the perspectives, maybe ask for clarity as we proceed in a discussion on what might be done in the form of taking action. For those of you, some of who completed the survey, some of what you might not even know what it was all about. In March, we surveyed the 317 Alberta municipal CAOs who also engaged their mayors and councillors. About 20% responded, a blend of the 3, that is CAOs, mayors, and councillors, but also well represented with the regions north, central, and south, and each of what we call the jurisdictions, the counties, the towns, the villages, and the rural areas. Less so the cities. There was some response from cities, but it was not massive. I think it was 3, whereas in all of the other instances we had in the range of 20. I think there were 95 responses overall. The questions sought to rate 10 issues that were identified in the survey, asking the respondents to identify them in terms of importance, and to include associated recommendations that they would like considered, including revisions to the Municipal Government Act. And as most of you are aware, there has been recently a rewrite of some aspects of that act, and it may come up in discussions today. So next, I'll show you the ranking of the issues, how they came out in terms of importance for each of the municipal relationships. For some of you, you've seen this before. The red highlights the top 4. The top 4 issues of importance were first, provincial downloading. Second was role clarity and council direction. Third was the soaring of public expectations. And the 4th were provincial government grants. Now, the 5th was cited as being within the realm of the municipal-provincial relationship. I'm not sure, as I thought about it over the last couple of weeks, that it might be mislocated. It might be more appropriately allocated under council, because the 5th of most important of the 10 was tackling of diverse roles beyond means. And most of the municipalities felt that this was being imposed upon them. And others were saying, no, it's because the councils themselves have responded to special interests. But one way or another, I'm going to cite the tackling of diverse roles beyond means later on in the presentation as really a challenge to council itself. This was a summary of the overall highlights, that there was a very close alignment apparent on the relative importance of the 10 issues among the CAOs, councils, regions, and jurisdictions. And that's very important, because that would indicate that if action or initiative is to be taken on these issues, there is a belief that they are important as they have been rated. And so the top three that we cited were within the realm of addressing the municipal relationship with the province. The exceptions were the role clarity and council direction was most important for CAOs and mayors. This is an important point. So the issue here was, do councils and councillors understand just what their role is? And the importance of this issue is relatively high. I think it was around 3, and included council direction. This was important for CEOs and mayors, but less for councillors, who are really forward-facing with the public itself, who rated higher voter apathy and municipal accountability, and also the hindering of collaboration due to competition. So you have, I'm going to stretch it a bit, CEOs and mayors probably paying most attention to administrative matters, particularly revenue, whereas the councillors themselves more in touch with the public themselves. The second possible exception was role clarity among the regions appeared to be less important for the South and villages and rural jurisdictions. So it was aligned at the town and county level, but the South and the region and the villages and rural appeared to see it as less important. And now that may imply that there's a lot more clarity. Well, it would imply there's more clarity and less of an issue in the South. Also, a possible exception was regional governance. That is the capacity of municipalities to work together on common issues among the first 4 jurisdictions. That is counties, villages, rural jurisdictions, appears to be more important to smaller villages and rural areas. And I suspect that's because they're the ones that are viewed as the most vulnerable, in which case to handle that vulnerability may call for collaboration among them. So for them, that would be important for their viability. Overall, municipal issues associated with the province appeared to be the most important. So that is looking at municipal issues with the province, with other municipalities, with the public, and with council itself. It was the issues with the province that appeared to be the most important of those 4. So this was the overall summary as we got finished with episode 1, which was survey highlights and the jurisdictions and the councillors and CEOs, etc. All municipalities appear vulnerable to provincial downloading and grant cuts, and that was uniform. Councils are challenged to clarify their role in managing multiple relationships with limited resources among soaring public expectations and voter apathy. So if we had to say any one thing in an elevator to the premier or to a mayor, we would say this is what the overall response of CEOs, councillors, and mayors was, that we've got a problem and this is the way to summarize it. The recommendations, which were summarized, targeted council's options to address the issues, including recommended revisions to the Alberta Municipal Act. And I will cite them very, very briefly. I'll provide the headlines for each of the recommendations, but not a lot of the detail. The detail can be found by going back and looking at episode 2, that is recorded as a recorded webinar. Episode 3 today is, okay, where do we go from here? Is change called for? And if so, in what form? What should it look like? I'd like to say today, and I mentioned this as a preview before we got started, I'd like to keep the word protest out of the room. It seems to become epidemic and has become associated with violence. I'm not sure that's really where we want to be. The biggest question is continuing growth, which has been so apparent among the municipalities in Alberta, manageable. Are municipalities, as we have envisioned them, even sustainable? Is what we have revealed through the surveys that serious? So let's turn now to taking action. To have a shared action plan, the following strategies have been tailored to execute the recommendations associated with each relationship. And they underscore the importance of communication, cooperation, and collaboration. Starting with communicate, cooperate, and then collaborate. The intent is to effectively initiate policy changes and address municipal problems while strengthening the various relationships which need to be managed and engaging the various stakeholders. Now, there's a lot of information on some of these slides. It is repeated from the earlier webinar. These were the council issues. And there were two initially, and I've added the third, as I noted earlier, of tackling diverse roles beyond the means. But the three issues that council zeroed in on council were: one, role clarity and council direction; then tackling diverse roles beyond their means; and then third, addressing voter apathy and enhancing municipal accountability. These issues were rated as the second in importance, fifth in importance, and 9th out of 10. And then the recommendations followed. So you can see in each instance, we cited 5 recommendations. That was the consolidation of sometimes 90 comments or 90 recommendations. We're not going to report back on the 90, but I used an artificial intelligence tool to consolidate them down into the top 5. And you'll see under role clarity and council direction the importance of training and education. I think some comments have been made in the recent Municipal Act to make training mandatory, and that certainly aligns with recommendations that came out of the survey. The tackling of diverse roles beyond their means is recognizing the source of the problem, and the survey was indicating it emanates principally from the province. Issues of asset management need to be addressed, clear division of responsibilities, looking for provincial support and advocacy, which may mean closer involvement, closer working relationships between the province and municipalities. They talked about their MLAs. And then working more closely with the community to help the community understand just what is the role of a council. Is it being stretched beyond its means? Is it being stretched beyond its role? And then on the voter apathy, the promoting of qualifications, the pre-training of leaders, the refining of recall legislation, the trying to combat the polarization, which seems to be apparent on a North American scale, and with a heavy focus on communication. So as far as council went, one of the bigger questions or overall is continuing growth manageable, even sustainable, if these issues can't be addressed? When we looked at the action that was being proposed, it fell into 3 camps: education and training, internal communications, fostering open and collaboration among council members, policy development, clear processes for policy development, including opportunities for input from members and stakeholders, and then evaluation, which many may not think about as we move forward. It's all well and good to get action underway, but to evaluate whether or not progress is being made was one of the elements of action, was to regularly evaluate the effectiveness of existing policies and make adjustments as needed, particularly in the dynamic environment that we live in here in Alberta. Whether you're referring to urbanization or increased immigration or the highs and the lows of the economy, working in a municipality is clearly a dynamic undertaking. When we looked at the public, there were 2 primary issues zeroed on the public. One was soaring public expectations, and the other was the demand for inclusivity amid cultural shifts. For the public expectations, manage expectations honestly. We seem to have gotten carried away in responding to special interest groups without recognizing that we're stretching municipal roles beyond our means. The importance of communications, the clarifying of roles and responsibilities, the holding of town hall meetings, and using tools like social media or all the more modern and contemporary tools that we have today to engage the public, and to serve as an advocate for funding and recognizing that some of these expectations have to be met. But I rarely see, and this is me speaking extemporaneously and off the cuff, I rarely see any discussions of cutbacks. I have never seen a X budget or a cutback budget from a municipality. Now, maybe they do exist, and Dennis, you might want to comment on that later, but it seems to me the expectation of municipalities is always to grow, always to catch up with inflation, but never to take seriously that maybe it's time to start rationalizing some of what we have been facing for the last 50 years since World War II, as municipalities have grown and grown and grown. That is, there seems to be no end. And then 10, the demand for inclusivity, the importance of maintaining equality. Some would call it equity. I'm not sure that one can actually maintain equality, and that is everyone is equal and therefore gets equal treatment, as we've got a lot of diversity, but I think that it's an effort to maintain quality. Promoting inclusivity, allowing and ensuring everyone's voice is heard, respecting diversity, avoiding political agendas. And that's an important item because we've seen with the rewrite of the Municipal Act that there is now the expectation that municipalities will have political involvement at the provincial level, and that is provincial parties may have municipal representation, and certainly listening to residents. The actions: community engagement through consultations and town hall meetings, transparency, the communication openly about challenges faced by the municipality, and the rationale behind proposed policy changes. I would hope that local media would help in playing a strong role there, is communicating openly and through what medium? How do we do that? Town hall meetings, local newspapers, social media, groups. Education, providing resources and information to help the public understand the importance of any proposed policy changes. And then feedback mechanisms, establish means by which feedback can be achieved to allow the public to provide input throughout the policy development process. The third relationship was intermunicipal. The issues were the hindered collaboration due to competition, as municipalities fight with one another to try and garner economic interests. The urbanization toll on rural areas as the population thins out due to the attractions of the urban areas. And thirdly, how elusive it is to achieve regional governance. We've touched on each of these in the earlier webinar, but these were the recommendations that had come forth for each of these particular issues. The overall action being recommended, and one might not be surprised here. One might say that these have already been undertaken and question whether they've been effective, but they are the actions that stemmed out of the survey, and that is the importance of networking, of building relationships on an ongoing basis with neighboring municipalities through regular meetings and forums, the sharing of information, best practices, and lessons learned to foster mutual learning and collaboration, the undertaking of joint projects, which I've personally seen that if you want to start working together, there's nothing like coming up with a project, whether it be a parade or a swimming pool, whether it be a recreation center, or even the challenging of the province with the municipality, working together on projects, identifying areas where collaboration can lead to more efficient service delivery or cost savings, and forming advocacy coalitions with other municipalities to advocate for shared interests at the provincial level. So there's some overlap among these actions, but they seem to be fundamental, four-legged stools, if you will. And finally, the provincial issues, which I might have addressed this first, but I thought I'd leave it till last because it's the one that we see the media spending the most attention to. And the one that clearly was rated as the most important of all was to manage the provincial relationships and the impact that the province is having on municipalities in three areas: provincial downloading, which was ranked as the most important; provincial grant cuts, which was rated as the fourth in importance; and tackling of diverse roles, which I noted was probably a mutual issue between the province and the councils themselves. On the provincial downloading, the recommendations were obviously to ensure adequate funding follows downloading or precedes it, or at least discusses it; transparent consultation and collaboration; the distributing of resources equitably; the prioritization of critical services and infrastructure in particular; the reassessing of provincial funding and responsibility structures. As for the grant cuts, stop the grant cuts, diversify the revenue streams, distribute the funding equitably, encourage economic development, advocate for funding stability. So when there's a grant cut, if the municipality wishes to maintain the course or the status quo, it's got to find other sources of revenue, which are either achieved through tax increases or economic stimulation, so they've got an additional revenue stream. Overall, the impact on municipalities is challenging their sustainability. And if municipalities play a role in the province in governing of communities, then addressing the issues that are challenging its stability is important at the provincial level as well as at the council level. The action for improving on the provincial relationship is research and analysis, understanding existing provincial policies and regulations affecting municipalities and how; engagement, initiating dialogue with provincial representatives through meetings, correspondence, and presentations; Correspondence includes social media as well. Proposal development, the development of clear, data-driven proposals, outlining the issues and recommending solutions. And hopefully that's exactly what the data that we've gathered here through this survey will make it a little easier for the municipalities to collaborate together and take action at any level. In the interest of advocacy for policy changes that benefit the municipalities while aligning with provincial goals, that's called collaboration, and offering opportunities on joint initiatives to address common challenges. I'm also citing here what we concluded episode 2 with, is the rewriting of the Municipal Government Act, and these were the recommendations. Operate municipalities as a business or like a business. I think that was discussed as, are we talking about as a business or like a business? And I didn't change the word here, but the discussion led to a discussion whether or not we mean as, or whether or not really it's more appropriate to discuss it as or like. Strengthening code of conduct and protection for CAOs, enhancing legislation on code of conduct and providing stronger protection for CAOs. The ensuring of transparency for candidates, which we saw earlier, the importance of unrestricted transparency for all candidates, including disclosure of FOIP-related information related to their qualifications. The training and education, which I need not repeat. The improvement of accountability and governance by strengthening accountability measures, such as establishing provincial bodies to investigate code of conduct violations, tightening of conflict of interest rules, and providing support systems for enforcing disqualifications of councillors. I've also included timelines. Whether they're reasonable or not would depend upon what action ultimately is initiated. It would seem like appropriate that in the spring, preparing and sending the survey report to all CAOs, including reference to the webinar recordings for review, sharing, and comment. We have been circulating the webinars, notice of how to get access to them, that included these PowerPoint slides for each one of the episodes, and we'll do the same for this third. I would like a discussion today, if you'll put a note down on whether these should be consolidated into a single report, written report for circulation, or whether the PowerPoints and the webinars are adequate. I guess it would depend upon who wants to take the next steps. Over the summer, meeting with AUMA and RMA to share the report or the material that we've generated to this point, and proposing further action, including measures to change for the public, the municipalities, and the province. So it isn't just the province that is highlighted in the survey. It is work that can be done between municipalities and between the municipalities and their public, and what can be done at the council level for the design of a standard training program that could be achieved over the summer. If all goes according to the timelines as proposed here, we'd be ready by the spring to possibly co-host a provincial conference, which we'd be more than willing to help with in providing the information, to finalize any recommended action or responsibility for each municipal relationship. In other words, the bottom line is everything we've generated is in the form of a recommendation. We don't have any authority to impose anything. We're simply helping in the preparation of analysis and background. As a third party independent, we have no axe to grind. We have nothing to gain. We do this for the purpose of, well, our own interests and general communication. So that's where we're at. I will now open it up and ask Dawn and Dennis if there's anything you want to share, and then I'll open it up more generally to all of those who are in attendance.
Sure, I can start, Dawn, if that's okay with you. So basically, Perry's summarized the various recommendations and so on, and all of it is really quite logical and normal, I would say, in terms of how we would normally recommend to make change and to make the system work better. What I'd like to identify for you and for us to collectively think about now is the aspect is that Alberta is a rapidly changing landscape. As we can see, when we started this 3-4 months ago, it sounded, we thought we could come up with some things that would be very, I guess, reasonable in terms of how one could go about making changes. However, in the last 2 to 3 weeks, we've seen major changes, major shifts by the Alberta government, which impact municipalities significantly. And this is what the municipalities are really dealing with, and I haven't even absorbed yet from the survey that has been done. So, you know, everything from the change in party politics, for example, at the local level, the aspect of simply withdrawing a transit pass in Calgary and Edmonton and then reversing position to putting it back in again, to the aspect of infringing on municipal roles. So this makes it very difficult to say train councils. Well, how do you train councils when we're dealing with this kind of a changing landscape that has so many impacts? There's a lot of things that are available now to municipalities to deal with some of these recommendations. For example, there's economic development initiatives, there's partnerships, and so on and so forth. There's training. There's asset management. That's been going on now for over 10 years or more in terms of how municipalities can manage their assets. The aspect of strategic planning in terms of how municipalities set their priorities and deal with the aspect of downloading and so on. And of course, many municipalities do council training now. And why isn't that effective, you might say? So those are some things I think at this point we'd like to listen to. What do people think about this? And really, where is this all going? So those are initial comments.
Dawn, you want to add anything further to Dennis?
Yes, and I'm adding something from just based on my work with municipalities or the work I do in the excellence field. And this is just a good management system that helps anybody in any organization run it well, you know. And as I look at these issues and dealing with change and anticipating change and making good decisions, governing well, and so forth, I think that it's always really good to give people a bit of an overview of this so they can use it to their advantage, because it will keep you out of trouble and help you stay in your lane and help you serve your constituents well. Work well with your suppliers and partners, which are, of course, the province and sometimes the federal government and so forth. So I just wanted to reinforce that, and it's pretty straightforward. You know, it's not rocket science, but it would really, really be beneficial to, I think, people in municipal government, because it's the Wild West out there these days. Do you know? I feel for a lot of them in their positions with everything that's coming at them, and this would help them manage that much better.
Well, it's very interesting, the fact that I think both you and Dennis have alluded to the fact that the dynamics at the level of the municipal government and its relationship with the province and with the federal government, because this tension between the federal and provincial government is now spilled into the municipal as well, as the province wants to control whether or not the federal government should be imposing or should have a relationship at the municipal level. So we've got that issue that has boiled over since we initiated this survey itself. So the dynamism at the municipal level is ongoing. And that raises the question of sustainability. Now, I'm not Chicken Little. I don't think the survey in any way says we've got a crisis, but we've certainly got an array of fundamental issues. Every one of those 10 issues was rated at least moderate in importance.
Perry, I think the aspect that municipalities are creatures of the province, and that goes back to the BNA Act in terms of how that was structured. And what we're seeing now is an extreme amount of interference, I suppose, at the municipal level, when the Municipal Governance Act says that municipalities are responsible for looking after their community. And at the same time, we're having all of these constraints and funding issues that are affecting how councils can even deal with this.
So one of the questions that I've had from the very beginning, I mean, I live in St. Albert and I've lived in the Edmonton region now for too long. Not too long, meaning I'm frustrated, but too long in terms of my age. The communication about what's happening at municipal level is a byproduct of what happens in your media. And if you're in Vilna, I don't know whether you've got a media that even knows Vilna exists. So where do you learn about what the issues are in your community? For many of these 317 municipalities, that are towns, county, and villages, and I'm sure there aren't 317 newspapers out there, and I wonder whether the regional coverage is even adequate for them to feel they've got a tool that is in any way relevant to keeping their public aware of what's happening, unless you go to a council meeting. And I don't know whether these small towns have town hall meetings. I don't know whether they use social media. I don't know whether they have signage or whether I don't know what life is like in Elk Point or in Vilna when it comes to understanding the challenges of the municipality in any other way than getting angry because there's no other communication that they're going to have. They're not building a relationship. It's something to saran wrap thin. They don't pay attention to it until it finally hits them, and that's a little bit late. Sharon, you're nodding your head. Any comment you want to make there?
Yeah, I've got lots on this one. I'm I'm torn between what it is, of course, that has been revealed in the survey to say, we've been there, done that. It's been going on for 40 years, and we know there's lots of needs for communication. There's a lot of need for training, and there's, as I think Dennis had said, there's tremendous amount of training going on. Maybe there's more in some quarters than other municipalities, etc. But we're in a soup right now. So if that is going on ahead, I think we have a provincial government that is working behind the scenes on topics I don't fully understand. So I'm wondering if there's a consolidation at play here behind the scenes that we haven't been aware of, and does that lead to confusion as well among the municipalities? I think there's that going on. What we've seen in this survey, Perry, is again much of what we probably might have anticipated. Lack of communication, lack of education, or too much downloading. But on the other hand, there's the federal government who has made artificial intelligence a priority for this country. Is it possible that we could find a position which hasn't been touched by anybody and help our municipalities know what could be taken advantage of through this advancement of technology that we are going to be experiencing for the next generation? I know that some of our municipalities are probably slow adoption. We've seen it in social media and communication. There's maybe frustration there, it doesn't happen. But this is something that's happening to us as important to us as the entire internet 30 years ago. Maybe there's a spot there that we could slide in and get the municipalities interested as well as the provincial government interested in. So that's what my thoughts are.
Okay, along those lines, I mean, the real positive to me in all of this is the alignment, the extent to which there was an agreement. There is very little variance for a survey of this scale to touch 95 different individuals that are involved in municipality, to see how well aligned these issues were. That would indicate the possibility of them having a unified voice and going forward to other municipalities on what we need to do differently, what we need to do at the council level, and what we do particularly with the province. We should have a strong voice with unanimity among the 317 to take issues to the province. You would think that would be listening. Now, do municipalities have adequate representation with their MLAs, much less with Alberta Municipal Association and the rural municipalities? Are those, I don't want to publicly evaluate them, but it would seem to me this is a huge opportunity for them to work with this data, to work in recognition that there is a general agreement among municipalities and get on with it. I don't know whether they feel empowered.
I mean, I think that I'm such a huge fan of anything evidence-based research, and you've gone through an awful lot of work to bring this research to the forefront here. But I can't understand, or maybe I don't know, and maybe you do know, what other research and survey work has been done by the rural municipalities themselves and the cities. There's two distinct groups, I guess, at the Alberta Rural Municipalities Association.
Okay, Dennis,
Yeah.
that being done at the municipal level, I remember that study out of Calgary seemed to echo a lot of what we're doing here coming out of the university. But where does research go on or policy advocacy go on?
Well, so primarily Alberta municipalities and rural municipalities are the key focus in terms of representing urban and rural municipalities to the province. And the province does always, not always, I should say, but the province will consult with those two organizations. So that's the mainstream, I would suggest, that represents them in Alberta. Of course, FCM is the other major organization across Canada. And FCM does a fair amount of study. But again, usually these topics are specific focused. And what I see missing is the aspect of bringing all of this together in terms of all of the impacts that are occurring over the last, say, 2 to 5 years in terms of how things have changed and how rapidly they have changed. And nobody is putting that together that I've seen. Now, maybe somebody has, but I haven't seen it. So I think that's a big gap. And is necessary.
The gap that varies, but what you've touched on with this survey, that's a gap that the municipalities have not measured.
Well, I don't think anybody's done this comprehensive review here of taking
No.
10 most important issues. I mean, even getting those 10 issues to the table and then putting them into the 317 municipalities and saying, rate them as importance, give us recommendations. And then the next question, and this is where it all comes together, the rubber hits the road. Who takes this forward? Benita expects us, she says, I propose that Perry and others head to the FCM conference in Calgary in June. Well, that's probably relatively easy to do. I mean, I've got a car. I wonder if one or more meetings could be set up and recommendations could be heard. We did not get engaged in this as consultants looking for a contract, or as advocates looking for power and influence and a name. We've done it because we were curious. But we've got something here that has value to someone. Who does it have value for? And are they willing to pick it up and take it the rest of the way? Besides George Cuff, that's probably writing about it vehemently right now. Dawn, you're nodding your head. Any comments you want to make?
Yeah, and there's other sources of information that I'm thinking about. And we've just recently done this, past year or so is we've done an assessment with municipalities in Alberta. And we've asked them to self-assess how they're doing against this management system that we know works really well. And they did very well, but it did reveal a few opportunities for improvement. And it's really interesting because those opportunities for improvement are kind of echoed in these results too. What people are saying is some of the issues that they're facing, right? And so that sort of thing would be very good to share. And it's also very good to share examples of really high performing municipalities that have, facing similar issues, but have been able to overcome them and even getting some great ideas from them and things that municipalities here can try out, because you'll find that there's all sorts of ways to save time and money, which I think should be music to their ears, but to also engage your staff and work more closely with your suppliers and partners, your constituents and so forth, to kind of get everything moving in the desired direction. And so I think that kind of lifts a bit of a weight off the municipal shoulders, this sort of thing. But that's another bit of information I think that would be good to share. There's some good data and comments there.
If I was a CEO and a mayor and a councillor that generally are reporting that they see these issues as they have been reported, I would say initially what is close to home is my relationship with my council, and they've seen these recommendations. So as a wrap up, we could send a note out and say, here for you specifically are the recommendations of the issues that we're seeing at the council level. You might take notice. Leave it at that. The second set of issues is the intermunicipal issues. We could send that to a UMA. It's not hard to do, and say to a UMA and an RA, these are the issues which we've identified as affecting other municipalities. And by the way, council could also get the issues of public with the public. But the final one, which is the provincial one, would need to go to a UMA and RMA to say, we understand that you are representatives of the municipal district. Here's a report. There's a section here on municipalities and other municipalities. you may want to take note. I get on with golf. I have a good summer. I go on from there. We leave it with them.
Yeah.
Benita? You've never been silent before.
Thank you. My head's all over the place today. But where the province is pushing to amend the MGA with Bill 20, and they're looking at making some changes, I think what may have been part of the motivation for that was how Edmonton City Council made a deal with the feds about a national urban park. And I have concerns about national urban parks because that implies to me Albertans might be limited access to certain areas that we weren't accustomed to be limited from before. Plus, there might be a cost associated with accessing those areas. So I'm not that crazy about national parks. And it worries me when there's so much emphasis on environmental concerns to the extent that it has an adverse effect on economics. And so right now, the province is on the right track in so many ways. Our economy is improving. There are more jobs now. So I'm mostly in favor of Bill 20, but I am curious to see what amendments they're going to propose. And I have a certain level of trust for this provincial government. So it's not bothering me too much that it looks like they kind of want to rein in municipalities a little bit, because I feel with Edmonton City Council making that deal with the feds, they basically left the province out of the conversation. So that's not appropriate to me. That's some sort of crossing of a boundary there. And that's something that needs to be addressed. And so I'm very grateful that there was a petition on that issue brought out last fall, and then it came forward as Bill 204. And then MLA Brandon Lunty was speaking to it in Alberta legislature. And it passed on April 15th. And so I think the momentum of that might have been part of them putting through proposing Bill 20. So anyways, and I'm also, of course, in favor of eliminating tabulators and electronic voting. When you look at people in Alberta, we have a certain level of distrust for certain things. And in general, we distrust tabulators and electronic voting machines. We have more trust in the hand count. So although the municipalities are claiming hand counted ballots are going to cost us more money and time, so be it, because that's what more voters trust. So let's do that.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I appreciate your overview of Bill 20. Could you come back, however, to what you would recommend we do with this survey?
I love the idea of sending out the survey results to not just everybody who participated in the survey, but also those who didn't. I don't know if that was done yet, Perry, was it?
Yes, it has been. The episode 1 went out to all 317. Episode 2 went to 317, and this one will go to all 317. What's not been done is where from here. And that's why this session is really a discussion of what you as viewers that have shown up think we should do with all of this material now. And you put a note out that you felt we should go to the whatever FCM is. And we've discussed to some extent highlighting for the councils what was specific about the public relationship and internal council relationship. We send to AUMA all the material, but highlight specifically the material that was related to other municipalities in the province. And we send to the minister the entire package and highlight the conflicts that are occurring. And all that is a letter and access to the webinars. I'm not sure that writing a report is necessary, but you know, that's just more work, more effort.
Well, another option might actually be extending the survey, since they didn't all participate in it. And since the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is having a conference in Calgary in June, I look at that as a wonderful opportunity to perhaps extend the survey and get more people participating in it. So if we could have a booth there, I don't know all the rules of booking a booth there, but Perry, if that's something you wanted to pursue, I would most certainly support you. And I love the idea of them doing the survey there, or even maybe we have another survey and we could present results of this survey or a previous survey. So, you know, a 10 by 10 booth, we could have posters up, we could have forms to fill out. And then I think also what's important about that Federation of Canadian Municipalities conference is also just the presence of being there and building relationships with people from the AUMA and the RMA. I mean, perhaps you already have some relationships established, but you know, it's an opportunity to strengthen them, build more new relationships. And so I think having a presence there is just really important. Like, this is an opportunity we can't pass up. We got to figure this out.
Okay, Benita, you have an ongoing and an active interest in helping serve as a catalyst to bringing municipalities together. If you look at us as being more of a communicator than an advocate body, I'm not interested in empowering the KEI network as a municipal representative. I think we've done a survey. We'd like to put that survey on the hands that would benefit most from it. People like yourself, villages of Vilna, those are looking for empowerment through research. We've provided the research, but we really don't have the manpower or the resources to out and be an advocate. Giving it to AUMA should help them. Giving it to villages and towns would help them. And helping you helps you. I'd like people to appreciate our 4-letter word called help. We can give you help, but there's not a lot more that we can do.
Maybe it's time for the various stakeholders to sit down around the table and action some of this. You know, because I can see the associations saying, oh yeah, this is in our neck of the woods. This is something we can do about that. And the province is the same and municipalities are the same. So I can see where you could have a good conversation around the table about these findings.
Yep.
And then take action on them. And, you know, maybe it's on a certain timeline, so much this year, so much next year. But I'd say start, and it's within, you know, the mandate of some of these associations to look after some of these things too, right? Or to coordinate with others. So
I would underscore that last sentence of yours. I think that is their mandate.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be careful not to undermine that mandate. I would rather that we reinforce that mandate rather than looking like a competitor.
Yeah.
And my personal concern in doing this type of thing is that people don't understand why we're doing it, and assuming we are frustrated with someone. We're not. We're giving them something that maybe they hadn't thought about, and maybe they weren't sufficiently independent. This should be a value to them. Go ahead, Ron.
Have you considered possibly getting AUMA and RMA to co-sponsor a conference that you put on that deals with this specifically?
Well, that's what the third recommendation was in those timelines, was to meet with them, show them what we have here, indicate to them we'd be more than pleased to turn it over. If they saw we had value and could help, the idea of co-hosting a conference makes a lot of sense, but that would be in discussion with them. Benita?
Two things. Well, three. The AUMA and RMA likely are already having conferences. So what if this became an aspect of the current conferences that they're already hosting? So that's one item. Another item is, what about releasing the results to Municipal World? I have just recently started to subscribe to Municipal World, and from what I can tell, it's a fairly comprehensive Canada-wide online magazine that is covering a lot of issues. And what I suspect would happen is the results of this survey wouldn't necessarily go in one article. It would be spread out over 3 or more articles. So I just wanted to offer that as a suggestion.
I think that makes sense. And I think if we were to send a letter to the municipalities and send a letter to AUM and RMA and send a letter to the Minister McIver, with the attachment being access to the webinars and maybe some highlights, then we back away and indicate if they would be interested in meeting further. We have some ideas on how to take this forward, things like working with them on conferences they might already have scheduled. They may be interested in becoming and this excites me, that they may be interested in doing this survey annually. We don't have to do it. If they want to take this survey and take the questions and use it as a benchmark, go for it. I think they should be doing this. I think this is in essence, an assessment of what needs attention. And I don't know how they're getting that information at the present time. And maybe they have a means, but I don't think they're doing survey work with municipalities. Maybe Vilna could speak up here, or Don Gimbel. Are municipalities being surveyed by the province or by AUMA on issues and issues of importance, Don and or Lori or Tammy?
Perry, I'd add one that was surveyed, the province surveyed, what was it, about 6 months ago, about what contracts the municipalities had with the federal government. Once they got that information, that's when they passed the bill to, is it a bill or a policy that restricts municipalities to do business with the feds anymore.
Okay. Okay, Don, do you want to add anything here? I'm looking at those that are actually out in the municipalities today, and I'm looking at Don, I'm looking at Lori, I'm looking at Tammy. Is there anything you wanted to add here about how adequate the research is about your needs? Don?
I would suggest that the world is changing so rapidly that by the time you get one study done, it's obsolete.
Okay. All right, well, change word of the
That's
day.
the inhibition.
Yeah. Okay, an important point. That means you've got to be on top. 5-year planning is out the door today. You've got to be adept enough to do annual, if not quarterly, planning. Anything Vilna wants to add? I know you made a comment on the chat that communications with your public is extremely complex. Getting the public to stand up or stand out until they see a tax increases that is unsustainable or unpalatable. I'm seeing that, by the way. I have another event later on this evening of a number of actually gentlemen, and I say that carefully because I don't want to get into misogyny, but that have stood up and said they're frustrated. And the question is, are they frustrated enough to take action? Do they want to put a candidate forward? Do they want to put a letter to the editor? What do they want to really do other than just meet and drink over their frustrations? Well, I've got excellent ideas through this discussion. If I were to summarize what I think we can do, given our limited resources, I would say, one, we can take the information that we've gathered in the form of the webinars and distribute that, highlighting the provincial issue to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, the municipal issues, all of the issues, but highlighting the other municipalities and to AUMA and RM, indicating we'd be willing to meet if they wish. Same with MacGyver, and also send to the 317 CAOs to share with their mayors and councillors what we've learned, highlighting and specifically the recommendations as it related to those 3 issues that were facing them regarding the public and their own council. At that point, it's up to them to respond whether they feel we have anything to share with them of value and whether they wish to have further discussion. But Benita, I was impressed enough, and thank you very much for the invitation, with the group that you have as a catalyst and with bodies like CFM. But if you think that we could work together, Benita, with your group, that's, and Carol, I think you know what Benita's been up to. I'm impressed. You bring 50 people to your webinars, I bring 19, and most of them are family.
Well, actually, some of the webinars have had over 100, and we meet once a month on the 27th of each month, and it's entitled Conservatizing Your Municipal Councils and School Boards. It's not about a political party. It's simply about bringing a set of values. And so your strategies for influencing current elected representatives and administration, as well as strategies for replacing them. And I find it very empowering to people to learn about how to engage with elected reps and administration. For many people, this is new. I truly do want to cure apathy.
Yeah. Well, if tax increases such as you're seeing in Edmonton are going to be the way of the future, you won't have to do much in the realm of encouraging or discouraging apathy. The province and municipalities are doing it themselves. A question was raised, I think, Mel, on the side of whether or not any monitoring is going on regarding it's the word viability. The province does do viability assessments of the municipalities to try and target those that need to figure out sustainability strategies, whether they be with other municipalities for merging or whether they be further activity in economic development. So there is some interest at the provincial level, recognizing that some communities don't have long-term viability the way they're going. I noted last week that in Japan, 40% of the municipalities are expected to die by 2050 as a product of urbanization and low birth rates. Now, whether Alberta faces that with immigration, I don't know. When you get out of the cities and you see how small Perryvale is, and Rochester, you really wonder, with there being one store and someone selling eggs from a farmyard, whether they can make it or not. And how they handle this downloading and the increased responsibilities of municipalities behooves me. I don't know whether you want to add anything here, Dennis, or Carol. Carol, you got your hand up, but unmute. Yeah.
Yes, I'll unmute so I'm not talking to myself. But I just wanted to share with you, and this is going back in time, when you talk about municipalities, a number of them disappearing. In Saskatchewan, back in the late 70s and early 80s, there were over 600 villages and towns that disappeared because of the push to urbanization and the push away from small farms. And I mean, what I'm hearing you say now, Perry, is basically the same thing. Here's the other thing: urbanization can continue to grow, but there's a limit on that as well. Like there truly is. So when we're looking at municipalities and the rural municipalities are there for a reason, and generally it is for farming and that a different way of life. It's how do we actually preserve that? I mean, that's part and parcel of what Canada is as well. So I just wanted to, to say that municipalities disappearing, I mean, that has been happening, I think, to the detriment of each province.
I think one of the things that to take into consideration is that farming is no longer a small operation.
No.
These are multi-million-dollar operations now that take up vast amounts of land, and therefore you don't have the need for small villages and so on. Everything is concentrated in big centers and big supply centers. And this is probably going to carry on, especially as the family farm is basically disappearing or almost disappeared. And so corporations are taking over the aspect of farming. And that, I think all that has an impact on small communities and what happens with their small municipalities.
Yeah.
Well, that all falls under the umbrella of urbanization, whether or not it is the pull or the push. There's something going on at the municipal level in the rural areas that is dynamic, and it is challenging the governing of communities. And the model that we've used in the past may well need to be rethought. I know at one time people talk about regional governance versus municipal governance, and maybe we need to think more about that collaborative activity being initiated at the municipal level instead of waiting until it's so late that you feel like you're a victim. All of this boils down to leadership. And one of the things that triggered this going back to February was I was sitting on a bus and there was a mayor in back of me and a CAO, and they were having a discussion and they were talking about these things, many of which I'd never heard of before. And I thought, well, with the network that KEI has, I think I'll go out and inquire. And you've reinforced it. And that will be one of the letters. I will be thanking those two individuals for having inspired this. But that's the way change comes about, is you hear of an issue, you can either become Eeyore and a victim. I have no tail and I'm frustrated and I'm angry and I'm going to protest, or you take a leadership role and you turn it into a positive and you look for ways to get out of trouble. And I'm hoping that our municipalities are the latter, and that is they're taking this as an initiative to do things better. Sharon, you want to say something further, and then Shirley?
Yeah, I have a question for both John and Dennis, wondering if there is something like a municipal charter or municipal charter that has ever been created on behalf of municipalities and the province. And is that something that might be useful going forward when we're wanting to encourage or lock down agreements to for education and communication, methods of communication?
I'm not aware of any recent, there used to be a charter with the city of Calgary, city of Edmonton, but I don't think there's anything that exists now. Could be wrong, but I don't think so.
So you would see that to bring some harmony in terms of approach?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. If these concerns are repeatedly showing up in the various surveys from the different sources, again, education, communication, understanding of our roles and responsibilities, maybe what we do is recommend that a municipal charter in the idea of a team charter essentially might speak to that in terms of how we commit to our education for new councillors coming in every 4 years, because of course the need is ongoing. And then to what level of communication will we commit to? And how do we follow through on that communication? And what type of communication do we agree to? And can we improve on our methods of communication? And then there might be something more specific on subject matter or topic, but at least on those general terms.
Well,
I think maybe what we could refer to is as many municipalities have their own internal planning aspects related to the training program, the initiation to how their municipality works, their strategic planning cycles, and so on. So there are those kinds of things in place with many municipalities, but not. I don't think maybe in the terms that you're expressing it as such.
You know what I was thinking too is that there needs to be some clarity. I think even if part of the education, I mean, giving people a good idea of what the responsibilities of the federal government are, the provincial and the municipal. And so they know to stay in their own lane, and they know about roles and responsibilities. And then you don't end up with a situation like as what's happening in Calgary right now with the blanket rezoning and the strings attached to funding that they've received and what's coming down on the residents. I mean, it's just to me, looking from the outside, is a real strong indication there that there's not an appreciation of roles and responsibilities and mandates and even the decision making that's taking place without the constituents being involved at all, right? I mean, it's wild. It's the Wild West.
The constituents for this work has been the 317 municipalities. And if there is this degree of unity that we've seen, then the idea may be timely to actually develop a charter which provides some degree of unity. And that charter may be a recommendation coming forth from a RM and AM, that's Alberta Municipalities Association and RM, that they could work toward achieving that.
You just talked about unity. I'm kind of wondering with these communities that you talk to, what kind of appetite do they have for collaboration? Because if you look at Edmonton, even the different quadrants are always competing for amenities to be built, for upgrades to be done. Of course, the city can't do it all at the same time, but the municipalities are competing as well. Some things they can work on together, like highways, etc. But is that a collaboration? Is that potentially viable?
Well, that was one of the issues. I can't recall. I think it was number 5, but regardless, it was one of it was called under regional governance and the challenges of achieving it and what might be done to improve the opportunities for regional governance. Because you're right, the competition for economic resources is no better example is the challenge we've had in achieving some degree of regional collaboration in the Edmonton region. And now with the industrial heartland potentially being the recipient of $200 billion to develop one of North America's strongest regional economies. But if you can't get harmony among the local regional players, and the municipalities continue to play games with one another as they all want to chop up the piece of the pie for them, the 200 billion opportunity will go elsewhere.
Mhm.
Therein lies the importance of regional governance. And at some point in time, I would imagine if the province sees that municipalities can't get along and are sacrificing a $200 billion opportunity, the province, rightfully so, will step in. Okay, that's a good place to wrap up. My takeaway is a letter for each of the 4 principal stakeholders, including the, I'm going to add the MLAs to the list. I will send the letter to McIver with the carbon copy to the MLAs. I will send a letter to the CAOs for them to share with their mayors and councillors. I will send a letter to RM and AM with the highlights of the survey and leave it at that. And if they wish to meet and follow through, so be it. And the same, Benita, I'm doing that verbally with you. If you think what we have here is of value to you or to others, this is public. There's no copyright on any of this information. You can have the survey, you can read it yourselves. And I will be sharing it to the 2 people who inspired me on the bus. So thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, George.